The story of humanity's rise among the stars did not begin with victory. It began with laughter, not the warm kind, but the cruel laughter of civilizations far older and far more powerful than humankind. When humans first reached beyond their solar system, they were filled with hope. After centuries of struggle, wars, and endless effort, Earth had finally built ships that could travel faster than light. It was a dream come true. To meet other intelligent beings, to share knowledge, to find friends among the stars. The first human explorers thought they would be welcomed as equals, but reality was far from that dream. The first encounter happened near the edge of the Andromeda cluster. The humans discovered a massive alien ship unlike anything they had ever imagined. Its surface shimmered like liquid light, and its design seemed to twist space itself. The beings aboard called themselves the Korath Dominion. They had ruled their region for thousands of years. When they saw the small human ship approaching, they didn't see brave explorers. They saw children playing with tools they didn't understand. Their first message to humanity wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. They told humans to stay in their own system, to not wander into civilized space. The Korath claimed the galaxy belonged to them and other ancient empires. Humans, they said, were too young and too violent to be trusted with galactic power. News spread fast. Soon 2 other galactic civilizations joined in their mockery, the Vethnar Collective and the Aurelian Ascendancy. The Vethnar were a hive species, connected through shared minds, proud of their perfection and unity. They viewed humans as chaotic, flawed creatures ruled by emotion. The Aurelians were a species of pure energy, their bodies glowing like stars. They saw humans as fragile and dirty, trapped in physical form. Together, these 3 empires controlled more than half of known space. They called humanity the primitives from Sol. They laughed at human technology, bulky engines, noisy reactors, weapons that used chemical explosions instead of refined energy streams. In the grand halls of their galactic councils, humans were spoken of as a cosmic joke. When humanity requested entry into the Galactic Council, a place where species worked together to maintain peace, they were denied. The Korath ambassador had said, "You are not ready. Your kind still fights among itself. Your species destroys its own planet. What could you possibly offer us?" The humans who heard those words returned home with heavy hearts. But on Earth, those words didn't crush hope. They planted something else, a seed of determination. The Earth Federation, which was still forming, gathered leaders from every human colony, from the dusty mining worlds of Mars to the floating cities on Venus. They talked for weeks about how to respond. Some wanted to fight, but the scientists and diplomats reminded everyone that humanity couldn't win a war against such advanced species. Not yet. Others said humanity should keep learning, keep growing silently. And so, humanity made a choice. They would watch, they would learn, and they would remember. Years passed. The galaxy moved on. The alien empires stopped paying attention to Earth. To them, humanity was just another species that would fade into silence. But humanity didn't stop. They studied every bit of alien technology they could get their hands on. They reverse-engineered small devices found on black markets and from wrecked ships. Slowly, piece by piece, humans began to understand the secrets of faster-than-light communication, energy manipulation, and matter construction. While alien societies grew lazy in their comfort, humans grew sharper. Every scientist, engineer, and soldier carried the same unspoken goal: to prove them wrong. Still, the mockery continued. Human trade ships were charged double for simple resources. Colonists were denied protection in intergalactic zones. Even human ambassadors were treated as curiosities rather than equals. One meeting on the Aurelian homeworld became famous when an alien diplomat said, "You still walk on 2 legs and breathe air like animals. You call that evolution?" Back on Earth, the insult spread through the networks like wildfire. For a brief time, people were angry. Then they laughed. Because anger alone wasn't enough. Humanity had learned something from its long history. Patience was a weapon. Generations passed. Humans continued expanding, first to the moons, then to the outer planets, and eventually to the nearest stars. The colonies on Proxima, Vega, and Epsilon flourished. The human population in space grew larger than that on Earth. People began to see themselves not just as Earthlings but as Terrans. Still, the other civilizations watched and sneered. They called the Terran expansion a desperate attempt by a dying species to feel important. But in hidden laboratories, beneath the ice of Europa and under the deserts of Mars, something far greater was happening. Humanity was building the foundations of a new kind of science, one that didn't depend on alien approval. There were secret research programs that even the colonies didn't know about. Scientists discovered strange properties of gravity and energy that others thought impossible. They created engines that could bend space without tearing it. They built ships that didn't need alien parts. Quietly, the human dream of true independence began to take shape. But still, they remained patient. Outwardly, humanity appeared calm, trading with some alien races, sending explorers to chart new regions. Yet every generation carried the memory of those early insults. Every child in school learned about how humanity was once mocked by the 3 Galaxies. It became a story told not in bitterness, but in pride, a reminder that they were underestimated. Among the stars, humans started forming new communities, new cultures. Life was not easy. There were pirate raids, accidents, and political struggles. But those hardships became part of what made humans unique. They didn't rely on hive minds or energy forms. They relied on spirit, courage, and the strange ability to find hope even in failure. There were times when aliens would visit human colonies just to observe them like animals in a zoo. They would laugh at the crude machines, the imperfect cities, the simple songs played on old instruments. But even those aliens could not ignore one thing: humans never gave up. They kept smiling, kept working, and kept building. Then came a moment that changed everything, though not yet a war. During a galactic trade summit, a human engineer presented a small engine prototype that could outperform similar alien tech. The room filled with whispers. The Aurelian scientists dismissed it as luck. The Korath laughed and said it was stolen technology. But the human engineer smiled and said, "If we were so primitive, how could we build something you can't?" That simple question spread across the networks. For the first time, some alien thinkers began to wonder, were humans really as weak as they seemed? Still, the powerful empires refused to admit it. The mockery continued, but now it carried a note of fear. Humans were progressing too fast. In a few short centuries, they had achieved what took other species millennia. Some even whispered that humanity's chaos, the very thing aliens mocked, might be their secret strength. By then, the Terran Federation had begun to form. It wasn't official yet, but colonies started uniting their defense and communication systems. They built new shipyards hidden in asteroid belts, training pilots who could think faster and adapt quicker than any machine. The old nations of Earth set aside their differences. Humanity had seen enough of alien arrogance to understand that survival meant unity. But they still stayed quiet. The empires had spies everywhere, and the humans didn't want them to see what was coming. They continued to act humble, still calling themselves the junior species, while deep inside they were building something unimaginable. By the end of that century, the laughter from the 3 Galaxies had grown faint. They believed humanity would never rise higher than their small cluster of stars. They stopped watching closely, and that was their biggest mistake. Because beneath Titan's icy crust, deep under layers of frozen methane and steel, engines far larger than cities were beginning to hum. The sound was soft, almost like a heartbeat. Humanity had started building something that would one day change the balance of the universe, something that would make the galaxies remember their cruelty forever. The humans didn't want revenge. They wanted respect. But they knew one truth that the alien empires had long forgotten. Respect in the stars was never given freely. It had to be earned. And one day soon, the universe would learn what it meant to underestimate the people of Earth. For many years, humanity stayed patient. The great alien empires had mocked them, called them primitive, and laughed at their dreams. But the people of Earth and its colonies had learned how to wait. They kept growing quietly, spreading across nearby systems, building new cities on strange worlds, and turning silence into strength. It was a time of strange peace. The alien races didn't attack anymore, but they also didn't respect humans. They treated them like background noise in the grand story of the universe, a small, noisy species that would never rise above its own limits. But deep inside every human heart, there was a quiet fire burning. Humanity had come too far to bow down again. The dream of unity had grown stronger than ever. Across Mars, Venus, and the moons of Jupiter, human colonies were linked through massive relay networks. People began to call themselves part of a single civilization, the Terran Federation. It was not yet an official government, but it was real in the hearts of its people. Humanity was becoming one. Then came the day that changed everything, the day the peace was broken forever. It began on a distant world at the edge of Aurelian space, a small mining colony called Helios Frontier. It wasn't a rich world. It was mostly rock and dust, but it had one thing everyone wanted: rare metals that could power entire fleets. The miners there worked hard and lived simple lives. Most of them were families who had moved from Earth, hoping to build a better future away from overcrowded cities. One morning, communication from Helios Frontier suddenly stopped. At first, the Federation thought it was a technical failure, maybe a storm or equipment issue. But when they sent a scout ship to investigate, it never returned. A few days later, the truth came out. The Aurelian Ascendancy, one of the three great empires, announced that a security accident had occurred. They claimed that human ships had entered restricted space and their defense systems had responded automatically. According to them, it was just an unfortunate misunderstanding, but it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a massacre. Thousands of civilians had been vaporized in an instant. The colony was gone, burned to ash. The Aurelians didn't even send an apology. They spoke to the Galactic Council saying, "We regret the loss of life, but humans should know better than to wander where they do not belong." Those words spread like wildfire through every human colony. The images of the destroyed settlement, the burnt metal and drifting debris reached every screen across the Federation. Families cried, miners clenched their fists, and leaders stood in silence. That silence didn't last long. The Terran Assembly met on Mars. Every representative, from Earth to the farthest outpost, attended. The room was filled with anger, sorrow, and something new: unity. No one talked about which colony was richer or stronger. They all spoke as one people. The message was clear: this cannot happen again. It was in that moment that humanity truly changed. They were no longer explorers or dreamers. They had become protectors. While the alien empires ignored the outcry, believing humans would soon calm down, the Federation began something secret, a plan that would take decades and require every ounce of their willpower. It began under a new name, whispered in hidden labs and military channels: Project Goliath. No one outside the Inner Council knew what Goliath was. On the surface, it looked like a deep space construction program meant to strengthen defenses. But its true purpose was far greater. Humanity had realized one simple truth: words meant nothing to those who only respected power. So humanity decided to build power unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The project started beneath the thick ice of Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Far from the eyes of alien scouts, enormous hangars were carved into the frozen crust. Inside, thousands of engineers, scientists, and workers began designing something completely new: a fleet that could defend humanity against any empire. It took years to even build the tools needed for construction. Materials were shipped in secret from Mars and the asteroid belt. Every worker signed an oath of silence. Some of them never saw their families again. They worked in darkness, in cold, and under constant pressure. But none of them complained. They all knew why they were there: for Helios Frontier, for the lives that had been lost, and for the generations yet to come. Meanwhile, the alien empires went on with their politics and pride. The Aurelians expanded into new systems, claiming more resources. The Korath Dominion started another war against a smaller race. The Vethnar Collective watched both sides, feeding on the chaos. None of them cared about humans. None of them imagined that the species they mocked was quietly preparing something that would shake the stars. Back on Earth, the government was changing too. Old rivalries between nations began to fade. People realized that they weren't just citizens of one country anymore. They were Terrans. That word carried new meaning. It meant survivors, builders, and dreamers of impossible things. Slowly, the Federation turned into a true government. A council was formed, guided by both civilian leaders and military minds. The first priority was security, not for expansion, but for protection. The fleet was reorganized. Mars became the central command for deep space operations. New shipyards opened around Jupiter and Saturn. Every young pilot, every engineer, every scientist felt the same quiet determination. Never again. But while the Federation grew stronger, it still had to act carefully. The alien empires had spies everywhere. If they learned what Project Goliath truly was, they would attack before it was ready. So humanity hid its progress behind trade agreements, research deals, and false reports. They pretended to be struggling with small problems while secretly pushing the limits of physics itself. One of the greatest breakthroughs came from studying the very weapon that had destroyed Helios' frontier. Scientists discovered how the Aurelian plasma worked and how to make it stronger. They didn't copy it. They improved it. It became clear that humans were not just fast learners, and they were innovators. Where alien minds saw perfection, humans saw potential for improvement. Decades passed, and the first prototypes of the Goliath-class ships began to take shape. They were not like any vessel ever built before. Their cores used quantum singularities to create energy fields strong enough to bend space. Their armor was made from metamaterial that could adapt under fire. And their main cannons could fire bursts of condensed energy capable of erasing entire fleets. But more than their weapons, what made them truly terrifying was their design philosophy. Each one was built to fight alone, but also to protect many. The engineers didn't build them for conquest. They built them so that no child, no family, and no world would ever face another Helios frontier. While the ships were being constructed, humanity continued to grow outward. Colonies became cities. Cities became nations. The Terran Federation's voice in the galactic markets grew stronger. Even the alien traders began to rely on human goods, not realizing that every deal, every trade route, and every mining operation was helping to fund the secret armada beneath Titan's ice. The galaxy had forgotten about Helios' frontier, but humanity never did. In schools, children learned about the lost colony, not as a tragedy, but as a promise. Teachers would tell them, "Someday, when the stars test us again, we'll be ready." And they were right. 50 years after the massacre, the Federation stood stronger than ever. It was no longer seen as a small cluster of worlds. It had become a presence, quiet but unshakable. The alien empires noticed, but they dismissed it. "Let them grow," said the Korath High Council. "They are still young. They will break themselves." But humanity didn't break. It sharpened. It learned patience, discipline, and unity. Deep beneath Titan, the first Goliath ship's engines roared for the first time. The sound shook the frozen caverns. The ship's name was simple, TFS Leviathan. It was a symbol of everything humanity had endured and everything it was about to become. When the engineers watched it rise from the ice, glowing blue against the dark sky, many of them cried. Not from fear, not from anger, but from pride. They knew they had built something that carried the spirit of their entire species. The Aurelians never apologized. The Korath never respected them. The Vethnar never trusted them. But none of that mattered anymore. Humanity no longer needed permission to stand tall, because now they had the strength to make the universe listen. And when the time came, when the stars once again turned hostile, humanity would be ready to show them. The age of mockery was over, and the age of reckoning had begun. The years after Project Goliath began were the quietest in human history, and the most dangerous. The galaxy thought humanity had finally accepted its small place among the stars. Trade routes opened again. The alien empires treated humans with mild curiosity, not fear. To outsiders, it looked like humanity had forgotten its anger. But beneath that calm surface, something huge was growing. Something no alien could even imagine. Far below Titan's icy crust, the first true Terran dreadnought was taking shape. It wasn't just a ship. It was a world of steel and energy, a moving fortress built by the combined effort of millions of people. Every bolt, every engine piece, every circuit carried a story. The engineers joked that the ship didn't just have a heart. It had billions of them beating together. The workers were from every part of human space. Some came from Earth's oceans, others from the Martian domes, others from the mining belts. They spoke different languages and carried different memories, but down there, in the frozen halls of Titan, they were all the same. Humans building hope. Each dreadnought took years to construct. The process was slow, dangerous, and full of failures. There were explosions, reactor meltdowns, and long nights where workers slept beside the machines just to finish on time. But no one gave up. They all knew that these ships would become the shield of their kind. As the decades passed, the project spread beyond Titan. New shipyards were built in orbit around Neptune, Pluto, and deep inside hollowed asteroids. The Federation had learned to hide its work even from prying alien eyes. What the Galaxy saw as peaceful construction was actually preparation for something far greater, a defense so powerful that no empire would dare touch humanity again. The scientists leading the project made discoveries that shocked even themselves. They created reactors that used micro-black holes to generate endless energy, something that had only existed in theory before. They developed metamaterials that could bend plasma fire and redirect it. They found ways to merge human intuition with artificial intelligence, allowing ships to react like living beings in battle. It wasn't about creating the biggest weapons. It was about survival, about never being helpless again. Every time a new design was approved, the engineers would whisper a simple phrase, "Never another Helios." It became the unofficial motto of the entire Federation. Back on Earth, people didn't know the full truth of what was being built, but rumors spread. People spoke of massive ships that could move between stars in seconds, ships that could cloak themselves in light, ships that could destroy entire fleets with one strike. At first it sounded like fantasy, but slowly the idea of the Dreadnought Armada became a symbol, not of war, but of pride. It reminded humans that even if others looked down on them, they could still rise higher. The Federation government did its best to hide the project. Every official record said the dreadnoughts were experimental cargo vessels, or deep space transport models. The alien empires didn't question it. They believed humans were too primitive to build anything so advanced. Their arrogance became humanity's greatest weapon. The first dreadnought, Leviathan, was finally completed after 60 years of work. When it powered up for the first time, the vibrations could be felt across Titan. The giant ship slowly rose from its frozen hangar, breaking through layers of ice and steam. Its hull shimmered like dark glass, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. When it reached orbit, every worker, soldier, and scientist stopped to watch. For a few moments, no one spoke. They just stared at the giant shape floating above them, a machine larger than any human city, silent but alive. Humanity had done it. They had built something that shouldn't have been possible. Soon after, more dreadnoughts followed. Each one was unique, built with lessons learned from the last. They were not mass-produced machines. They were crafted masterpieces. Each bore a name that represented human spirit: Eclipse, Guardian, Horizon, Sentinel, and others. But the Federation didn't want to use them. They hoped they would never have to. Every dreadnought captain was trained not to attack, but to protect. The goal was not destruction. It was deterrence. Humanity wanted peace, but a peace that could not be taken away. Still, the universe doesn't stay quiet forever. Whispers began to spread among alien traders. They had seen strange readings near human space, gravity distortions, energy bursts, and unknown signals. Some suspected humans were testing new weapons. Others laughed it off, saying, "Humans couldn't build something powerful enough to scare us." They were wrong. Inside the Federation, the Council met in secret sessions. They knew that sooner or later, someone would challenge them again. The Korath Dominion had begun sending ships closer to human borders. The Aurelians were demanding inspection rights in neutral zones, and the Vaethnar Collective had started broadcasting strange messages about reclaiming balance. It was clear that the peace was cracking. The Federation decided to prepare for the worst. Fleets were quietly moved to defensive positions. The dreadnoughts were placed under heavy guard. Pilots trained every day in simulations that mimicked alien strategies. The Federation's scientists began upgrading planetary shields and sensor systems, but most of all they focused on unity. On Mars, schools began teaching about the early years, about how humanity had once been mocked and pushed aside. Children grew up hearing stories of courage, sacrifice, and survival. They were taught that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or weapons. It was its ability to rise again, no matter how many times it fell. That spirit filled every part of the Dreadnought Armada. Inside each ship was a blend of technology and soul. The human pilots didn't just rely on machines, they trusted their instincts, their emotions, their will to protect. The AIs that ran alongside them weren't cold programs, they were built to think like partners, to understand fear, courage, and loyalty. One engineer once said, "A dreadnought doesn't have a crew, it has a family." And it was true. Even the smallest worker who tightened a bolt knew that their hands were building something sacred, a promise to every generation of humanity that came before and everyone that would come after. By the time the 10th dreadnought was completed, the Federation had become the fourth most powerful force in the known universe, and yet no one outside human space knew it. That was how carefully the secret had been guarded. But the galaxy is full of curiosity, and curiosity always finds a way. A Korath scout ship picked up strange readings near Neptune. The crew tried to investigate, but before they could get close, the signal vanished, as if swallowed by space itself. When they returned home, their leaders dismissed the report. "Impossible," they said. "Humans cannot cloak energy on that level." Still, the rumor spread, and that was enough. Within months, alien spies began trying to slip into human territory. Some were caught, others disappeared without a trace. The Federation handled it quietly, never admitting how much it knew. They wanted to stay invisible for as long as possible, but invisibility has a cost. The constant secrecy, the sleepless nights, the endless planning. It wore down the people in charge. Some believed they should reveal the Dreadnought Armada and show the galaxy that humanity was ready to defend itself. Others feared that doing so would trigger another war. In the end, the decision was made to stay silent. The Federation would only unleash its power if the galaxy left them no choice, and so the dreadnoughts waited. They floated in deep space, hidden behind artificial nebulae and cloaked within quantum shadows. Their engines stayed cold, their weapons silent. But inside, their systems pulsed gently, like a heartbeat waiting for the moment to rise. Every pilot who looked out into that quiet darkness knew the same truth. Humanity was no longer the weak species others had mocked. They had become something else. Something ancient, disciplined, and unstoppable. The Dreadnought Armada wasn't just a fleet. It was a message that said, "We are done being laughed at. We are done being the forgotten ones. We are human, and we are ready." The galaxy didn't know it yet, but history was about to change. The peace that had lasted for decades was about to shatter, and when it did, the roar of humanity's engines would echo across the stars. And somewhere beyond Neptune, inside the silent hangars of Project Goliath, the Leviathan stirred, as if it could feel the storm that was coming. For a long time, the galaxy stayed quiet. The alien empires were busy fighting each other for resources, trade routes, and power. Humanity continued to grow, building stronger colonies and better technology. The Terran Federation had become powerful, but it never bragged or showed off its strength. The Dreadnought Armada remained hidden, waiting in the dark like sleeping giants. Most humans believed the time of war had passed forever. They worked, raised families, and sent ships to explore new stars. The children who had grown up hearing stories about alien cruelty now believed those stories were only history. But deep inside, the Federation never stopped preparing. They knew peace could end in a single moment. That moment came without warning. One cold morning, every communication station in the solar system picked up strange signals. At first, the operators thought it was a mistake, interference from deep space. But when they checked the coordinates, their faces turned pale. The signals were coming from the edge of the system, near Neptune. Hundreds of unknown ships had appeared from hyperspace. They carried the symbol of the Korath Dominion, one of the same empires that had mocked humanity for centuries. The Korath claimed they were conducting a border inspection. But the truth was clear. This was not an inspection. It was an invasion. The Federation tried to send a diplomatic message asking the Korath fleet to turn back, but the aliens didn't respond. Instead, their warships spread into attack formation and began moving toward the inner planets. When the news reached Earth, the entire planet froze. People filled the streets watching the emergency broadcasts. Every colony, every station, every ship listened to the same trembling voice from the Terran command center. This is not a drill. The Korath Dominion has entered soul space. For a few moments there was fear, pure, deep fear. No one knew if humanity was truly ready. For generations they had built ships and trained soldiers, but the enemy they were about to face had ruled the stars for millennia. The Korath fleet was massive, more than 500 ships strong, each equipped with weapons that could melt continents. The alien commanders believed the humans would surrender the moment they saw their fleet. They thought this invasion would be over in hours. To them, Earth was still that same primitive world that didn't belong among the stars. They had no idea what waited for them. As the alien fleet passed Neptune, the outer sensors of the Federation went dark. The Korath ships jammed every signal, confident that no one could track them. But deep within the icy shadows of Saturn's orbit, something ancient began to awaken. In a hidden hangar beneath Titan's moon, alarms flashed in red. A single command echoed through the silence. Operation Leviathan, activate. For the first time in years, the Dreadnought Armada began to move. The hangar walls split open, revealing the massive ship, TFS Leviathan. Its dark hull shimmered against the faint light of Saturn's rings. Power surged through its core, creating a deep hum that could be felt in the bones of everyone nearby. One by one, the other dreadnoughts joined it. Sentinel, Guardian, Horizon, and Eclipse. When the last engine roared to life, the ice around Titan cracked like thunder. From Earth, people could see them rise through the atmosphere on their screens. Giant ships glowing blue in the darkness, moving with slow, steady power. The fear that had frozen humanity a few hours ago began to fade. For the first time, people believed they might have a chance. The Federation command sent a message to the alien fleet. This is Terran Federation space. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. The Korath commander laughed. You dare to order us? You are nothing but insects playing with stolen technology. But before he could finish speaking, something appeared on his radar. A single, enormous signature near Jupiter. The Leviathan had arrived. The alien ships turned their scanners toward it and froze. The readings made no sense. The human ship was larger than any vessel ever recorded. It emitted more energy than entire fleets combined, yet its hull seemed to absorb all incoming signals, like it was swallowing the light itself. For a brief moment, both sides watched each other in silence. Then, the Korath opened fire. Hundreds of plasma beams shot across space, lighting up the black sky like a storm. Explosions rippled through the emptiness, each one strong enough to destroy a city. But when the light faded, the Leviathan was still there, untouched. Its armor shimmered with a strange glow, bending the energy around it like water. Inside the command bridge, human operators worked calmly. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. With a single command, the Dreadnought returned fire. The beam that came from its main cannon was unlike anything ever seen. It didn't explode. It simply erased. Where there had once been Korath ships, there was now only silence. The entire first wave of the alien fleet vanished within seconds. The remaining ships tried to retreat, but the rest of the Dreadnought Armada arrived, surrounding them from all sides. The alien commanders shouted orders in panic. Their formation collapsed. The humans didn't chase them. They didn't need to. The dreadnoughts moved with perfect coordination, cutting through the invaders with precise strikes. Within minutes, the invasion fleet, the pride of the Korath Dominion, Iska, was gone. The battle was over before most humans even realized it had begun. Across the solar system, cheers erupted. On Earth, people cried and hugged each other. The same screens that had once shown fear now showed light. The sight of Terran dreadnoughts standing guard like silent giants. The impossible had happened. Humanity had defeated a galactic superpower in its own home system. But amid the celebration, the Federation leaders remained quiet. They knew this victory would not go unnoticed. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. The Korath Dominion was humiliated. The other empires, the Aurelians and the Vethnar, were stunned. For centuries they had laughed at humans. Now they had to face a truth they had never believed possible. The primitive species from Sol had just destroyed one of the oldest fleets in the known universe. In the Galactic Council, chaos erupted. Some called for peace, others called for revenge. No one could agree on what to do. The Aurelians accused the Korath of starting a war they couldn't finish. The Vethnar demanded an explanation, worried that humans might turn their new weapons against them next. Back in the Federation, the dreadnought captains gathered around the central command table. They didn't boast or celebrate. They reviewed every detail of the battle, searching for weaknesses. They knew more enemies would come. This was only the beginning. On Earth, children looked up at the sky, seeing faint glows where the dreadnoughts drifted in orbit. Parents told them, "That's our shield now. That's what keeps us safe." The people of Earth had finally earned respect, not through words, but through strength, courage, and unity. The Federation decided not to pursue the retreating Korath ships. They didn't want to start a war of conquest. Humanity had never sought to rule the stars, only to survive among them. But survival, they knew, required power. For the first time in history, the alien empires began to fear humanity. Not because of their weapons, but because of their spirit. A small, fragile world had stood against an ancient empire, and won. Weeks later, when the wreckage of the Korath fleet was still floating near Jupiter, scientists studied the remains. Many of them realized how far humanity had come. The technology that once seemed unreachable was now outdated compared to what the Federation had built. The students who once dreamed of flying to the stars were now building machines that could rewrite the laws of physics. Humanity had entered a new age, the age of the dreadnoughts. The universe, for the first time, was silent. No one mocked Earth anymore. No one dared call humans primitive. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little differently, as if recognizing the rise of something unstoppable. But deep down, the Federation leaders understood something important. This was not the end of their struggle. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, because power always attracts attention, and somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, others were watching. For now, though, humanity stood tall. The Earth, the colonies, and every human settlement across the stars celebrated together. They had faced their darkest hour and found their light. And above them, in the quiet void of space, the dreadnoughts floated in formation, their engines dim but ready. They didn't roar or boast. They simply watched, protecting the world that had built them. The galaxy had laughed once. It would never laugh again. Because the people of Sol had finally shown the truth. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was powerful, united and unbreakable. And from that day forward, no one ever forgot the moment the Dreadnought Armada unleashed its fury. The battle for Sol had ended, but the echo of it traveled far beyond the stars. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Empires that once looked down on humanity now whispered its name with fear and disbelief. Reports reached distant worlds carried by frightened traders and silent messengers. The humans destroyed the Korath fleet in minutes. At first, the other galactic powers refused to believe it. They said it was a lie, a trick, or an exaggeration. But when the wreckage of Korath ships was found drifting near Jupiter, the truth became undeniable. Humanity had done what no one else had dared. They had fought an empire and won. In the vast halls of the Galactic Council, a storm was brewing. Ambassadors from hundreds of worlds gathered, arguing, shouting, pointing fingers. The Korath demanded revenge, screaming that humans must be punished before they grew even stronger. The Vethnar wanted to study the new Terran technology, hoping to steal it. The Aurelians stayed silent, their golden faces expressionless, but deep inside even they felt uneasy. The balance of power had changed, and every empire knew it. Meanwhile, back on Earth, things were changing too. The world that had once struggled to survive was now at the center of galactic attention. The people were proud but cautious. They celebrated their defenders, but they also knew that their victory had come with a price. The galaxy would never leave them in peace again. The Federation leaders gathered in a secret meeting beneath the surface of Mars. Around a large table, holograms of admirals, scientists, and counselors shimmered in blue light. They discussed what would come next. One of the senior commanders spoke calmly, his voice echoing through the chamber. They will come again. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but they will come. And when they do, they won't underestimate us this time. Silence filled the room for a moment. Then the Federation director leaned forward. Then we prepare. We won't wait for them to come to us again. We'll take the fight to the stars, not for conquest, but for peace. It wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. Humanity had learned long ago that the only way to stay safe was to stand strong. And now, with the Dreadnought Armada fully operational, they had the power to do just that. Factories across the colonies began to work day and night. New shipyards were built around the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Engineers created faster drives, stronger shields, and smarter defense systems. Every scientist, pilot, and worker gave their all. They weren't just building ship, they were building hope. But even as the Federation prepared, they knew something else was happening in the dark corners of space. The Korath Dominion, humiliated and broken, was rebuilding. Their leaders swore vengeance. They blamed humanity for their loss of pride and power. In secret, the Korath gathered their allies, small, desperate races who feared the rise of humans. Together, they formed a silent pact, the Coalition of Retribution. They planned to strike humanity again, but not in open battle. They would attack the colonies, sabotage supply lines, and spread fear. The Federation's intelligence teams discovered fragments of this plan through intercepted transmissions. It became clear. The galaxy was preparing for war again. The Federation Council faced a hard choice: wait for another invasion, or take control of their destiny. After long debate, they made their decision. Humanity would not strike first, but it would not hide either. The Armada would leave Sol for the first time. Their mission to show the galaxy that humans would defend every inch of space they called home. When the news reached the public, people reacted with mixed feelings. Some were afraid, worried that leaving home would bring even greater danger. Others felt pride. Humanity was no longer running. It was standing tall. On the day of departure, billions watched the sky. From Earth, from Mars, from the colonies on the moons, people looked up as the Dreadnought Armada rose slowly from orbit. The sunlight glinted off their dark hulls like reflections on black glass. Families waved at the sky. Children held flags, tears in their eyes, whispering promises to the stars. The Armada wasn't just a fleet. It was a symbol of every human dream, every sacrifice, every struggle that had brought them this far. As the ships crossed the edge of the solar system, the commander's voice came over the open channel. We carry the will of humanity. We do not seek war, but we will not bow to tyranny. Those words echoed across every planet, every settlement. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy was listening. The dreadnoughts jumped into hyperspace, vanishing in a burst of blue light. For the first time in history, humanity's greatest fleet left its home system not in fear, but in power. Their first destination was a neutral system near the border of Korath space, a place known for its trading stations and mining colonies. The Federation wanted to show the galaxy that humans could protect peace without starting a war. When the dreadnoughts arrived, their presence alone changed everything. The traitors who once mocked humans now stood in silence as the massive ships entered orbit. Even the local alien patrols, usually arrogant and dismissive, saluted as the Terran fleet passed by. The message was clear. Humanity was not an outsider anymore. It was now a force that shaped the galaxy. But power always brings shadows. In a quiet sector beyond the trade routes, a Federation convoy disappeared. Dozens of cargo ships went missing without a trace. When the Armada investigated, they found wreckage and strange energy signatures. The Korath were testing new weapons. The Federation realized the coalition of retribution had already begun its plans. This was not just about revenge, it was about fear. The alien empires feared what humanity could become. Inside the command bridge of the Leviathan, the crew worked tirelessly to uncover the enemy's next move. They found that the coalition was gathering a massive fleet in the outer rim, thousands of ships preparing for an attack that would make the first invasion look small. The Federation had little time. They sent urgent messages to the colonies, warning them to prepare. Civilian ships were ordered to take shelter. Defense satellites were activated around every inhabited world. But even in the face of fear, something beautiful happened. Humanity didn't panic. It united. The people remembered the battle for Sol, how they had stood together and survived. And once again they chose courage over fear. Volunteers joined the defense forces. Scientists worked day and night, upgrading shields and engines. Miners from the asteroid belt sent extra resources for the fleet. Farmers donated food for the soldiers. Everyone gave something. The galaxy watched, and couldn't believe what it saw. While other empires argued and divided, the humans grew stronger together. Their unity became their greatest weapon. Then came the moment the Federation had expected. A massive fleet emerged from hyperspace. Not near Sol this time, but near the colony world of Proxima Prime. It was the Coalition's first strike. The Dreadnought Armada moved immediately. As they approached, the alien fleet tried to intimidate them with sheer numbers, thousands of ships covering the stars like a metallic storm. But humanity didn't flinch. The Leviathan took the lead, flanked by Guardian and Horizon. The commanders knew the stakes. This wasn't just a battle, it was the future of their species. If they fell here, humanity would never recover. Before the fight began, the commander spoke to every crew member. His voice was calm, steady. Remember who we are. We are not fighting for power. We are fighting for every human life, for every home, every dream, every child who looks up at the stars and believes they belong there. The crews responded with a single word: for humanity. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The alien coalition attacked with fury, but the dreadnoughts moved with perfect coordination. Their shields glowed with light, absorbing the enemy's fire. Their cannons unleashed waves of energy that split the darkness like sunrise. Even when surrounded, the human ships held the line. They protected the colonies behind them, refusing to retreat. When the smoke of battle cleared, the alien fleet was in ruins. The humans had done it again, not just through power, but through unity, skill, and unshakable will. Across the galaxy, silence followed. No one could deny the truth anymore. The humans were not to be underestimated, not to be mocked, and never to be conquered. And as the dreadnoughts drifted in formation, their hulls scarred but unbroken, a quiet pride filled every human heart. The galaxy had unleashed its fury upon them, and humanity had answered with its own, not cruelty, not revenge, but strength born from unity and the deep, unbreakable desire to protect their home. They had proven once again that humanity was more than a species. It was a force of nature. And the stars which once laughed at them now stood in awe. The Second Great War in space finally ended, but its echo would be felt for centuries. When the last coalition ships fled into the void, the stars themselves seemed to fall silent. The Dreadnought Armada stood victorious once again, but this time, the victory felt different. It wasn't about pride or power anymore. It was about survival and what that survival meant. Humanity had faced the galaxy's oldest empires, stood against overwhelming odds, and refused to break. The entire universe had witnessed their strength, and the mockery that once followed the word human had disappeared forever. When the fleet returned home, every world across the Terran Federation celebrated. Cities lit up with bright banners that stretched across skylines. Colonies on faraway planets sent holographic greetings that shimmered in the night. Even the quiet farming settlements on Mars and the mining camps near Pluto sent transmissions of thanks to the heroes who had saved them. The Dreadnought Armada, once a secret project hidden in the shadows, had become a symbol of unity. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was the heart of humanity's spirit, strong, brave, and deeply human. As the ships entered Earth's orbit, people filled the streets to watch them. Children pointed up, shouting with joy. Old veterans stood silently, remembering the days when humanity had been small, weak, and afraid. The sky was alive with movement. Hundreds of ships returning home, their engines glowing softly in the dark. Inside the command bridge of the Leviathan, the crew sat quietly. The war was over. Some smiled, others simply stared at the stars. Many had lost friends along the way, but they knew their sacrifice had not been in vain. One of the officers whispered, "We did it. We really did it." And the commander, looking out at the blue curve of Earth below, replied softly, "No, humanity did it." For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Council sent a message to Earth. It wasn't a warning or a demand. It was an invitation. The same empires that had once denied humanity a seat now wanted to speak with them as equals. The Federation accepted. A few months later, a massive gathering took place on the planet Aurora, the central world of the Galactic Council. Representatives from thousands of species attended. The hall, usually filled with arrogance and rivalry, now hummed with quiet respect as the Terran delegation entered. When the human representative stood before the council, everyone listened.
"We did not seek to rule the stars," he said.
"We only wanted a place among them. But when we were mocked, when we were tested, we did not answer with hatred. We answered with courage. We fought not to destroy, but to protect. And now we offer peace into every world that will accept it." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the alien delegates began to rise. Even the proud Aurelians bowed their heads. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer an outsider. From that day forward, Earth became a founding member of the Galactic Council. The Dreadnought Armada was no longer feared as a weapon of destruction, but respected as the protector of peace. Wherever there was conflict, humanity sent help, not to conquer, but to calm, to rebuild, to guide. The galaxy began to change. Trade routes opened between species that had once been enemies. Joint colonies were established where humans lived alongside aliens, sharing ideas and technology. The hatred and division that had filled the stars for centuries slowly began to fade. On a distant colony near the edge of known space, a young girl once looked up at the sky and asked her teacher, "Why did the stars stop laughing at us?" Her teacher smiled and said, "Because we finally learned to listen before we spoke. We learned to protect before we attacked, and we showed the universe what it means to be human." The wars had taken much, but they had also given something priceless: understanding. Humanity had shown that courage wasn't just about fighting battles. It was about standing for what was right, even when the whole universe said you couldn't. Years passed. The great dreadnought still patrolled the stars, but now their presence brought comfort instead of fear. They escorted refugee ships through dangerous regions. They delivered aid to damaged colonies. They were no longer seen as symbols of war. They were guardians of peace. The Leviathan, now decades old, became a floating museum, a living reminder of the days when humanity stood against the impossible and triumphed. People from every corner of the galaxy came to see it. Some touched its cold metal walls and whispered thanks. Others simply stared in awe. Inside, the ship's halls were filled with quiet stories, recordings, photographs, and messages from those who had served on board. One wall held a simple engraving: "We fought not for glory, but for tomorrow." That line became a saying across the Federation, a reminder of the time when the universe was dark and humanity became its light. Over the years, as peace settled deeper into the stars, Humans began to turn their focus back to discovery. The same drive that once built warships was now building exploration vessels. They pushed farther into unknown space, reaching regions that had never seen light before. And one day, far beyond the edge of the known galaxy, a human expedition discovered something incredible. Traces of another ancient civilization, one that had vanished long before any of the current empires existed. It was a reminder that even the greatest powers eventually fade, but the stories they leave behind can last forever. When the explorers sent back the first images, the message attached to them was simple. We continue, because that is what humanity does. Back on Earth, the people had changed too. The planet that had once been divided by nations now stood united. The sky was filled with orbital cities and research stations, but the ground below remained green, peaceful, and alive. Children in schools learned not just human history, but galactic history, how their ancestors had faced fear, how they had stood together, and how they had earned their place among the stars. On the anniversary of the Battle for Sol, the Federation held a remembrance ceremony. The surviving crew members of the Dreadnought Armada gathered together, now older, wiser, and still proud. They stood before the memorial, a great monument built from pieces of the old ships. The monument shone softly in the morning sun, its surface engraved with the names of those who had given their lives for humanity's future. The crowd was silent as one of the commanders stepped forward and spoke. When the galaxy laughed at us, we did not answer with anger. We built, we learned, we endured. And when the time came, we stood together. That is what made us strong. That is what made us human. His words echoed through the open air, carried by the wind. People wept, but they smiled too, because they knew. The story of humanity wasn't just about war or technology. It was about spirit, a spirit that never gave up. As the ceremony ended, thousands of lights filled the sky, ships, drones, and lanterns, drifting upward in silence. They shimmered like stars, a reminder that humanity's light now burned across the entire galaxy. In the years that followed, the Galactic Council named the peace era after the humans, the Terran Accord. Every major world signed it, promising to protect life, respect freedom, and never forget the lessons of the past. And somewhere deep in space near the edge of the Milky Way, the last active dreadnought drifted quietly, its engines cold. Its name was Eclipse. It carried no weapons now, only memories. Inside, a single light still blinked, the Federation emblem glowing softly. Outside its window, countless stars shone across the blackness. For centuries, those stars had watched humanity struggle, fall, and rise again. Now they watched in silence, as if bowing in respect. Because the universe had finally understood, humanity was not just another species. It was a story of endurance, courage, and hope. The story of a world that refused to stay small. A world that once mocked as primitive had become a guardian of peace across 3 galaxies. And though the warships no longer roared and the battles were long over, one truth remained eternal. Wherever humans went, light followed, because no matter how vast the darkness became, humanity had learned how to shine through it. And in that endless light, the legacy of humankind lived on forever.